All right, so we're going to get started. You got two handouts today. We'll get into exercise 214 in just a second, but you did get your assignment 203 handout, and I know you guys have assignment 202 still outstanding, but that's just kind of the way this structure works. We're going to start working on this skyscraper, or a version of a skyscraper, the final version of which is a little bit different. So the one that we work on today is a little bit shorter than the one that you're going to do as your final version, so they're not actually the same, but a lot of the skills are the same. There's really three parts to this assignment, and I think sometimes people get lost in all the various parts that are part of it. But one of the things that we'll concentrate on over the next couple weeks is creating background, like imagery, skies, suns, that kind of environmental conditions for your renderings. So there are going to be three renderings with sun, essentially, with background, sky, clouds, sun, that sort of thing. So you'll be turning in those three renderings. You will also create the flat laser cut file as if you were going to cut out your shape. And we'll talk about this. You do not actually have to build the shape, though. In previous years, I've had students cut them out and build them. That's why I have examples, but you guys don't have to do that, so that's good. So you will be turning in the AutoCAD file and a screenshot of the red and blue lines for laser cutting your skyscraper, so you would be able to do that. And then you will also, I will teach you how to create a watertight object and prepare the file to be 3D printed. So I have a couple of the previous 3D prints that are there. It is not actually required that you do the 3D print. It's required that you create the G-code file to 3D print, but you don't have to get this out the other end. The reason that I have set it up that way is because 3D printers are notoriously finicky, and they may or may not work for everybody. And so we're going to try to have all of you actually create a 3D print, but I can't make promises that it's going to work perfectly. The good news is this semester we have a great lab tech staff that are working very hard to get this set up for us so that we can actually do it. When it comes to your laser cut for 202 and when it comes to this 3D print file, I'll ask that you find one of the lab technicians and have them help you get it cut and or set up the 3D print file, etc. The goal is that you'll be able to actually, take something like this home. And it can then be whatever you would use this for. Paperweight, but they're not that heavy, so I don't know what else. Well, so anyway, I have some of these if you want to look at them going forward. So that being said, there's a lot of stuff that is part of this assignment. So you have to have three renderings. You have to have the G-code file for the 3D print, and you have to have the laser cut file. So there's a lot part of it. And so we'll go through it all in more detail. Of course, I will teach you how to do all of those things so that you'll be ready for it. And all of that is due together as one big package on the 15th of April. So remember, we have a week off for spring break. So it seems like the 15th of April is like way far away, but it's not really because we have a week off. There are 4 days left for me to impart wisdom before spring break. So I will do my best to get a bunch of stuff in before then. I did make sure that your 202 assignment is not due on Monday after spring break. It's due on Wednesday, so that you don't have to stress out about it on spring break. At least that's my goal. So that's where we stand. Okay, so today we're going to start actually creating a sample skyscraper. I'm going to walk you through this process, and a lot of our purpose today is to really learn about how do we start to create a complex shape, and or what kinds of shapes are good for actually building something. And that's important too. So you guys learned in the last section, we did all that work with topography, which is obviously a complex surface, and you learned that we could slice it up into pieces and glue it together. Well, buildings typically aren't made by slicing them up and building a waffle and there's your piece. They have to have some kind of a surface on them. And when it comes to making surfaces, three-dimensional curvature, and I think the easiest way to think of this is like an orange, is really difficult to create. So an orange grows organically, obviously, but if you tried to take the peel off of an orange, it would be really, really hard to take the peel off of the orange without breaking the orange in some capacity. because the curvature of the orange is in two directions. So when you go to peel an orange, naturally you create like a spiral out of it. And that's kind of an approximation of the shape. And if you were to put it back together, it's kind of an approximation of it. Rhino can actually unroll surfaces as long as they are a specific type of surface. And that surface is called a ruled surface. And essentially what that means is at any point on the surface, so if I was looking at this as an example here, there is a straight line between one edge and the other edge. So the surface can twist all at once, but there is always a straight line. It doesn't ever bulge out. Does that make sense? So that type of surface is called a ruled surface, and that's what we're going to be trying to work with when it comes to these projects. And so I'll walk you through how to kind of create that to start, and to create some fancy shapes out of it. When we get into three-dimensional curvature, that's when things are going to break down, and you won't be able to unroll it and whatever. A few of you will have surfaces that won't be able to unroll, in which case, for the assignment, I'll ask you to simplify for the unroll. But you can, of course, 3D print any shape you want. It doesn't matter if the curvature is in two directions. So let's go ahead and start working with our buildings. Today we're going to create a series of buildings, side by side by side by side, and ultimately you'll end up picking one that you like, and we'll bring it in and we'll set up environment next class, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and start by creating a very basic building. I'll use the rectangular box corner to corner tool. We'll start at point 0, 0, and the base of this is going to be at 100 feet, 200 feet. So our base, our lot, so to speak, that we can work with is 100 feet by 200 feet. How about that? I messed up. My units are not correct. So let me create my units first. And let's switch over into inches. Sorry about that. I'll go back to my box tool. We'll start at 0, 0. And this would be at 100 feet, 200 feet. Since I started at 0, 0, I wouldn't have to put the at sign in, but I did anyway. And our building height, okay, I disagree with myself here, which is bad. So we're not gonna do the height that I say in part 2. We're gonna do the height that I say in the introduction. I apologize. It's gonna be 600 feet high. So I'll go ahead and type 600 feet. And that then creates my basic shape for my, go into shaded mode there, for my skyscraper. So that by itself is not exactly the most exciting shape in the world. So we're going to start to transform this shape to create something a little bit more interesting. So, sorry, I'm just double checking. So I created in the handout there, I did it with a rectangle, and then I lofted the two rectangles together. It's fine. Essentially, I created the same shape. They are straight between the sides. So if I wanted to start to manipulate this particular shape, I could turn the edit points on. So I could turn on my, my points on for this. And I'd end up with some control points, and I could make some edits. But it's not really enough. So I'm going to introduce something called a cage edit. And what a cage edit performs is essentially you can put any object you want inside of a cage and then edit the cage, and it will manipulate the object based on your edits to the cage. So to get to that command, we're going to go to transform, and then we're going to choose cage editing at the very bottom, and we're going to go straight to cage edit. You can technically create the cage first and then do the edit afterward. I think doing it all at once seems to make the most sense. So we'll go straight into cage edit. It's going to say select captive objects. These are the objects that you want to edit. I'm going to choose this as my object that I want to edit. When I'm done, I press enter. Then it says select control object, or I can pick a bounding box. I'm just going to use a bounding box to go all the way around my object. There it is. Coordinate system, we'll go to world. And then we get to these cage points. X point count, Y point count, Z point count. I'm going to change all of those to 2 to start. So I'll change the X point count to 2, the Y point count to 2, and the Z point count to 2. So X point is 2, Y point is 2, Z point is 2. I'm going to do this and show you the difference. When I changed those all to 2, my X degree, Y degree, and Z degree all changed to 1. And that's a default setting. So we'll go ahead and say OK, and I'll press enter. Region to edit global, one more enter, and there we go. And you say, wait a minute, nothing happened. Well, something did happen. I have little control points on all the corners of my bounding box. It looks like they're the corners of the object, but it's actually the corners of the bounding box that contains my objects. So what I can do now is I can take these points. I could take them individually, or I can take them all at once. And I could, for example, rotate them. So I'll type rotate, and we'll rotate. Hold on, let me turn on my object snap. And I should rotate again because I didn't actually snap to anything. And I can take this and I can rotate it. And so as I rotate it, let's say I did it 15 degrees, it then twists my shape a little bit, puts a little kink in it. These are still very much ruled or developable surfaces because it's still, at any point here, it's a straight line across. So as I move up the surface, it's always a straight line between the two control curves. I could also, instead of using all the points, I could say, you know what, I'm going to take these 2 points here, and I'm going to rotate those the opposite direction by, I don't know, -5 degrees. And that then changes these differently. My building gets wider toward the top. Does that make sense? So this is a 1 degree change in that when I'm making my changes, it's always a straight line. So I'm going to show you this again. And I think it'll make a little bit more sense by breaking this into 2 pieces. So I'll do another building here at 100 feet, 200 feet. How about no extra comma there, 600 feet tall. There we go. And this time, when I go in to do my cage edit again, same thing, bounding box, world. Now in the control point count, I'm going to keep with my x point and y point as 2, but I'm going to change my z point count to 3. So I have 2, 2, and 3. My x, y, and z degree are still at 1. When that's done, I'll go ahead and press enter. And the difference here, there's global, is that I got a division of this shape in the middle, besides just at the top and the bottom. So the last one I rotated the top. This one, I can control the middle, those 4, separately from the top and the bottom. So I could rotate these by, say, 15 degrees. And it's pulling that out as a kink. I could take the top and I could rotate that the opposite way. Like that. And I can start to create a more complex shape because I have a division of this in the center, a kink. But notice that between these control points, it's still a straight line. So it goes a straight line from here to here and a straight line from here to here. That's what that degree is meaning. So if I did the same setup with the same control points, so this is again at 100 feet, 200 feet by 600 feet. If I did the same cage edit here, cage edit, bounding box, world, same x is 2, y is 2, z is 3, but I changed the degree of z to be 2 instead of 1. Watch what happens. There we go, global. I'm going to do the same rotate where I take this top and I rotate it. Right from there. And that's going to be 15 degrees. Instead of being a straight line from here to here, it's actually arcing all the way through my object. So I could take this middle section and I could rotate it the opposite way. Like that. And you can see that it's starting to twist that building. These surfaces, because it's only a 2-dimensional curve, it's curving in this direction, but not in this direction. So it's still a developable ruled surface. So I could still unroll this object. Because the curvature is happening here and not in between, like that. It is possible in a cage edit to get 3-dimensional curvature at 100 feet, 200 feet, 600 feet. So I'm going to continue on with the bounding box, world. We'll leave the same point counts, but I'm going to up this to 2, and I'll up this to 3. And actually, you know what? I'm going to up, yeah, that'll work. That should work for me. Let's go 4 there. All right, so I divided up my object into a few more sections. Now in this case, I could still take these upper ones, for example. I could rotate them by 15. It's twisting. But then I could say, you know what? I want to take these middle sections there, 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 and there, and I want to move them out. So now I've got curvature in 2 directions. I'm curving this way, and I'm curving that way. That's not a realistic building surface. So I can't flatten that out and create a surface out of it. So we're going to try to stay away from that. We're going to stick with just our 2-dimensional curves. So if you stick in the cage edits to a degree of 2, it should keep you in a developable surface. Sometimes, in some weird cases, it gets off. But for the most part, you should be OK. So you don't have to feel like you're stuck with just the rectangle shape. You can, of course, change what's happening down at the base. So instead of having an at 100 feet, 200 feet rectangle there, maybe I would work within this and shave off a corner. So I might go in to my polyline tool, and I might say, OK, I'll start here, turn on my midpoint snap. I'll come to right there. I'll come in here by 50 feet. I'll come out to that side. I'll come back over here. I'll go to that corner. Then I'm going to go down this side by 25 feet. And then I'll go ahead and close it. So this is now the footprint of my building rather than the rectangle. That's OK. So let's start with that as my footprint. I'll continue and go up, and I could just copy this. Let's go to copy, V for vertical. And I'm going to take this up maybe halfway, so 300 feet. And then we'll take one all the way at 600 feet. So I have that profile. It's as simple as I could take these two and I could loft them together, and I create that shape. I could, however, start to make it a little bit more complicated. I could say that instead of this profile, maybe in the center here, I want to go all the way out like that to the rectangle. And when I go from here to here, I want it to build out that shape. So it's actually inverting along this line. Now notice when I did that, I didn't just draw a rectangle. So let me go back a step. I don't know whether you guys caught that. So the simple answer would be, oh, rectangle tool, here to there. OK, that's good. And then loft this and this together. When you do that, however, you lose a lot of control over what's happening. Well, it ended up being similar. What I would prefer instead is to start and to draw the polyline yourself. So if I start here, this corner and this corner are going to line up. I draw over, and I want this corner and this corner to line up. Then this one goes back. Instead, I want this to come out. So I'll make sure my next line segment is there. Then I'll go back to here. That matches up with that line segment. Then we'll go straight along the side. Now we'll go out there. And we'll come all the way along this side there. And that then creates the rectangle. So it actually has more segments than just a standard rectangle. I'll delete that. So we'll take these two. We'll loft those together like that. Then I'll take these upper two from here to there, and I'll loft those two together. I'll say OK. And so that gives me this little kink that comes out. And that may or may not be attractive. So we'll take that. Then I can perform a cage edit of this whole thing. Though the truth is, it would be better if I had a top on my shape here. So I could go ahead and create a top first. And I'll use this surface to trim off that piece and that piece like that. We'll go ahead and join these together too. I'll take those plus the top, and I'll type join, so they become one poly surface. And then we'll go in and do our cage edit. So I'll go back to cage edit, and that's available under transform, cage editing, cage edit, or I could just type in cage edit. There's my captive object. I'll press enter when I'm done. I'll again do a bounding box. My coordinate system will be world. I'm going to change my y point count to 3. No, I'm going to go to 2. My z point count, I'll stay at 4, but I'm going to change my z degree to be 2. So remember, I want to try to keep the degree to 2 so I can't curve in 2 directions. So once that's done, I'll go ahead and press enter. One more enter gives me my control points. So there it is. So this time, let's take these 2 segments here. Let's move them by 5 feet out this way. There we go. And let's take the top and the bottom, there, and we'll move those the opposite direction by maybe 5 feet, like that. So it has a little bit of a curvature there. And then I could also take the top section, the very top. Oops, not quite. Oh, I got out of my cage edit. Let me go back to cage edit again. There we go. And let me rotate this top one by a little bit. So we'll say -5 degrees, like that. So it has a little bit of a kink to it too. This is now a pretty complicated shape. And I can start to say, OK, this is the shape that I like. This is the one that I want to work. So the first part, I want you to just build a bunch of shapes. And you're kind of playing with basic forms and deciding. Once you get to a point where you actually like your shape, we're going to start to build this out into a true skyscraper. So we need to add our floors and our ceilings and that sort of thing. So to do that, I'm going to take the object that I like, let's say it's this one, and I'll move it onto its own layer. So let me create a new layer. I'll change my object layer. It's now on this layer 1. We'll make that current, and we'll turn off the rest of the object. That leaves us just with my object here. So at this point, I'll go ahead and create a new layer. And it could be a sublayer to the layer 1. And we could name layer 1 skyscraper, for example. Organization is always a good thing. And in the skyscraper layer, I'm going to create a layer for floor. I don't know why it has an L in front of it. There we go, floor. I'll make that current, and I'll go ahead and establish a rectangle that is the size of the floor. Now, if I were to look straight down on my object, because it bends and twists a little bit, my floor needs to be a little bit larger than just that 100 by 200 feet that we started with. So I'll make sure that my floor is a little bit larger than my object. And there it is. Now, the first floor, we're going to have a little bit of a lobby down below. So it's going to be a 24-foot floor. So I'm going to go ahead and move this. Let me copy it instead. Copy. I'll go to V for vertical. And I'm going to go up by 24 feet. That creates my first floor to floor. So there's the ground. There's the first floor. Next floor is going to be at 16-foot intervals from here out. So I could copy V for vertical. I could start here, and I could go into 16 feet, and I could keep going. 16, and we could do math, 32 feet. You get the idea. That's a little bit too much work, though. Instead, I'd rather use an array, because I can copy the objects a bunch. So let's go ahead and do an array. And we did an array in 206, I think it was. So we're going to do an array. There's my floor. I'll press enter when done. Number in the x direction is just 1. Number in the y direction is just 1. Number in the z direction is going to be 36 or 37. I think it's just 36. And I'll go ahead and press enter. Then it says z spacing or first reference point. I can do this by clicking on a reference point and then saying I want 16 feet. Like that. Or I could just type in 16 feet, because I know it's 16 feet in between the floors. When I'm done, I'll go ahead and press enter. And Apparently I didn't type in that. So let's try that one more time. Array 1, 1, 36. There it is, 16 feet. There it is in that direction. I can confirm. I can look at the top. Yep, that got me all the way. I'll go ahead and press enter. And now I have all of those floor plates established for me. So that's good. The floor plates are larger than my building, so I'm going to have to clean this up just a little bit. I can use not the control object, I can use the surface object, there it is, as a trim. So I'll go up to edit and then trim. And I can trim off the floors around the outside of my building. You can select groups and let it trim at once. I wouldn't select all of them because it's an awful lot of floors to trim at once. But you'll work your way down like that, and you'll end up with all of the floors. At this point, I should actually create a sublayer for skin, or curtain wall, whatever you want to call it. Let me change object layer there. And that's just going to allow me to turn off the skin, and you can see all the individual little floor plates there and how they change as it goes up and goes down. So I have all of those floor plates. That's good. But I also need to have all the ceilings for those floors, because there's always space between the floor and the ceiling below. It's usually called the drop ceiling. For example, in this room, we're seeing the very bottom chord of a truss there. That brown piece of wood that goes across is not supporting the whole roof. That would not be enough to span that distance and support the roof. So up above this level is actually a whole truss system. It's about 4 feet of trusses and ducts and lights and whatever else that's up in there before the roof is on top. Same thing happens in a skyscraper. You need space in between the floors. So we're going to call that 4 feet. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the top. I'm going to create another surface. It's going to be a rectangular plane. I'm going to make sure that that's larger than my whole building. There it is. And I'm going to put that on its own layer. So I'll create another sublayer, and this one we'll call ceiling. There we go, ceiling. And let me right-click and say change object layer. Now it's on the ceiling layer. And so we're not going to start right here. We need to start up. So the first ceiling is at 20 feet if there's 4 feet between the floors. And the first one, if there is 24 feet from the ground to the next floor, this ceiling would be at 20 feet. So let me go ahead and move it. And again, I will type V for vertical. And we'll go up by 20 feet, like that. So at this point, I need to array the ceilings all the way up the building. So I'll use the same array command. Distance, number in the x, 1, number in the y, 1, number in the z, it's going to be 37 this time. And the z spacing of first reference point. Now this is one of those things that people get confused on, because the floor to ceiling is only 12 feet. But I wouldn't type 12 feet here. The ceiling to ceiling is still at 16 feet. I already adjusted for the fact that they're in a different location in the building, but they're still going to be at 16-foot intervals. So my z spacing would be 16 feet. I'll go ahead and press enter, and I can preview it. Make sure I have enough to get to the top. Oh, yep, I made it to the top. Perfect. I'll go ahead and press enter when I'm done to confirm it, and there's all of my ceilings. Same process here. I'll take my skin, I'll trim, and I'll go ahead and trim small groups. And we'll work my way down the object. There it is. And so when I'm done, I'll press enter. We could turn off the skin, and you can see that all the way up my building, I have a floor, space between floors, then the next floor. Space between floors, then the next floor, going all the way up the building. So I have a skin, I have space between the floors, I have floors, and I have ceiling. That's good. They're all on their own layers. The next piece of this puzzle would be to have some kind of an elevator core go through the building. And this is not a skyscraper design studio, so I'm not going to talk about egress and stairways and whatever. We're just going to call an elevator core with some stairs in it going in the building. That works out. If you're interested in this sort of thing, you're going to take 221 and do it there. So we're going to go ahead and cut all the way through the building with an elevator shaft or a stairway shaft. We'll call it just the core generically. And I'll do that. I'll go ahead and just create a box corner to corner. But sometimes placing the box becomes difficult. So I need to make sure that the box is completely inside of my building for it to work. I couldn't have a core here because it would stick out on the outside of the building. So we need to make sure it's inside the building. So sometimes placing it in the top view is useful. And so I'll place it, say, right here. And I'll say this is going to be at 30 feet, comma, 30 feet. And then I'll press enter. That gives me my base. And my height is going to be 600 feet, because that's the height of the building, plus probably another floor, because we've got to have equipment for the elevator to get to the last floor and that sort of thing. So I'll go maybe 608, 616 feet, something like that. So let's go 616 feet. There we go. And I end up with a little top where the elevator would come all the way out, or the stairs would come out to the roof, and that sort of thing. So that's good. I have my building core. That should go on its own layer. We'll create a new sublayer. We'll call it core. I'm going to right click and change that to be on the core layer. Let me change object layer. There it is. So I haven't yet cut all the way through the building. So I'm going to go ahead and take my core. I'm going to explode it. And with my core exploded, I'm going to select just the top of this piece. And I'm just going to type hide. That just temporarily makes the top go away. To get it back, you would type show, and it comes back. So I'll take that top, and I'll type hide. Now I'm going to use these 4 sides of my core and 4 as a trim for all of those floors going down through my building. So I'll go ahead and arrange this kind of at the top, looking down the elevator shaft, probably right about like that. I'll type trim, and it says select objects to trim. At this point, I'm going to click right in the center of this elevator shaft, and you can actually, if you click fast enough, you can start to see the elevator go down through the building. And we'll work our way all through the building. And at some point, we'll get all the way through everything. I think I made it. OK, so perfect. I made it all the way through the building. Like that. I now have my elevator core. There. I'll go ahead and type show so that I get the top back. And now I have the components of my building established. At this point, we need a few more things. We need to get this ready with some materials on it. We will, of course, get to the environment. That's what next class is about. But we're going to go ahead and set up some materials now. There is a material, and I forget whether it's in the whole material package or whether it's in today's exercise. Let me take a quick look. Yes, there are 2 skyscraper glass materials. Dark skyscraper glass and light skyscraper glass. To me, these are kind of approximations. They're not true glass. They're meant to look like, you know how skyscrapers have that bluish reflective glass on the outside? That's what this is. And so there's a light one that's kind of a lightish in tone. There's a dark one that's kind of a darker tone. You can pick between those 2 to apply to the outside of the building. So you can download them there. And I forget, they might already be in your material library. I can't remember whether I updated it or not. So we'll go ahead and load in some materials. I'll go to V-Ray Material Editor. I'll right-click on C Materials. I'm going to say Load Material. And I'll go to my flash drive, into my Resources folder, into V-Ray. And I'm going to go into Glass. And I should have Skyscraper Light and Dark. I'm going to use the dark one for right now. There it is. I'm going to right-click and apply this material to the skin layer. So it's going to be on the skin layer. I need to load some more materials. I'll right-click and say Load Material. And we'll go to my floors. And I'll make my floors out of concrete. So let me go ahead and go here to concrete. And we'll say, let's go concrete no seams. I will right click on concrete no seams and say apply material to layer. It's going to be on the floor layer. The ceiling, I need some kind of maybe whitish color, so I'll go ahead and load material. And I forget what I have for that. How about interior wall textured sheetrock white? Sounds good to me. And we'll go ahead and right click and say apply material to layer, and that would go on the ceiling layer. My core probably needs its own material, so I'll right click and say load material, and we'll go back to concrete, and maybe I'll do let's do vertical plywood with form ties. There we go. And I'll right click and say apply material to layer, and it's going to go on the core layer. So I've assigned all of my materials. I have not yet done any texture mapping, and you could at this point, if you run out of time, wait for next class and do the texture mapping next class, but we're here, so we might as well do it. So in terms of texture mapping, wondering how long it would take. In terms of texture mapping, I'm going to go ahead and view this in my render mode. There we go, so we can kind of see it. The outside building texture never looks quite right, the skyscraper glass. It will help once we texture map it. So let me show you the strategy for this texture mapping. The texture itself, let me go ahead and open that one up for just a second so you can see the files associated with it. There we go. So we have a couple files that work with it. Part of it is the reflection, but there is also a transparency gradient that's been established for you. This is the one that's actually used, where it's transparent, it's semi-transparent in the upper part of the panel, but the lower part of the panel isn't. That would be where the floor would occur, where we have the space in between the floors. So we need to make sure that we texture map it so that we're seeing all of that correctly. Likewise, the width here is meant to be about the size of a glass panel, so about 4 feet wide. So when we do our texture mapping, this is still roughly a box, so we'll apply box mapping to it. I'll select my skin, like that, and I'll come over to my texture mapping, and I'll apply a box map to it. Same thing, bounding box, world, all our traditional stuff. We can kind of see that we've got this and then this, but that's not right. So let's go ahead and show the mapping. So I'll click on the show mapping and we get the little widget here. I'm going to scale that and get it down to the right size. So I'm going to scale, scale. I'm going to scale 1D. And I'm going to scale from here to be the height of a floor. So we'll say maybe that's 16 feet. And suddenly it starts to feel like it's looking a little better. Then I'll say this was supposed to be about 4 feet, so I'll repeat the scale 1D, and I'll say from there to there is about 4 feet. And that starts to divide up the panel. We'll right click and I'll say from here to here is also about 4 feet. There are always areas, like in here, where I don't get the best results. I probably need to texture map that a little bit separately later on, but we'll discuss that next class. I'm going to then move this so that it lines up on one of the floors. So this was my first floor coming up, and there's my ceiling. The bottom part of the window, the way I had it set up, I know it shows transparent in the preview mode. It's not, it's the solid part. I'm going to make sure that lines up with my floor part, and then the transparent part is the upper section. Once that's texture mapped, you can start to see all of my floors in the building starting to line up. It looks good on the back wall. Right? So I know it's funky stuff's going on in here, and that's again something I'll have to fix later on. So I've got that established. I can go through and I can texture map the other objects if I want to. Truth is, I'm going to render from far enough away to where I'm not really going to see too much of it. And so at this point, it's just a matter of getting a preview out to see what it looks like. So I'll go ahead and I'll save this. I'll go to File and then Save. And we'll put it in today's folder. Do make sure you save it because we'll end up using this file again next class. So let me go in and we are on 214. There we go. Well, 2109. We went forward by a few years. Sorry. Okay, so I've got that. I don't have an environment set up yet, so I'll go back and use that exercise 208 sample file because that got it pretty close. So I'll go in and let's find exercise 208 again. And at the bottom there, I can do the sample file. Go ahead and open that one up. And this is a block reference, so I'll go to File, Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. And I'll go find that reference point. And let's see, it was here. And we'll go ahead and drop this whole thing in. I'm going to not embed it. I'm going to link it as a reference file. So if I wanted to update it, I could. And we'll drop it right there at 0, 0. And there it is. Let me actually move this. Two, 0, 0. And we'll get the view that we want. Maybe it's like that. And we'll go ahead and do a render of this. That's what I'm looking for today. So you get to the point where you'll be able to do this render today. So I'll go ahead and choose render. It is set up in a bit of a generic scene here. There's a little bit of sky color, but there's no surrounding context. There's no other buildings. So it looks a little bit still like, an object. But this is what we're after in terms of getting through today. You should, as this starts to evolve, you should see through. You should see your floors. You should start the little divisions in the glass and that sort of thing as it starts to come together. So I'm going to go ahead and let this render out. But this is essentially what you're after today. Remember, go through and play around with it. It's meant for you to have some fun, start to get generating forms, find something that you like and you're interested in. Question?
Are we just rendering one of these today or multiple? In part 3 it says 2 more alternatives.
Sure, go ahead and render. You're going to have plenty of them, so we might as well do a few more alternatives so you can decide. Next class, for exercise 215, we're going to take this building and we're going to put it in San Francisco and we're going to do a rendering of it there. We'll also start to create a sun and an environment, and you'll start to learn a lot more of the V-Ray settings for that. So we're moving in that direction. So spend your time playing around with the form today, because next class it'll be about V-Ray and environment and that sort of thing. And then the following class will be an even more complicated environmental setup. So we'll build our way into that. In 4 lectures, so I guess that would be the one right before spring break. That's where I'll talk to you about unrolling the surfaces, creating the 3D printing object, and that sort of thing. So we're going kind of through all of those right before spring break. Are there any other questions?
Does it have to be rectangular? Can we do like a circle?
You can do a circle. The challenge with the circle is if you're going to make it developable, something like this, if you take the circle and you twist it, it starts to get hard. For your purposes today, go ahead and do it. When we get to the unroll surface, and this is actually a good lesson for everybody, go ahead and do that kind of thing today. Create your bulge, create your profile, twist it, that sort of thing. And when we go to do the unroll surface, you'll realize, oh, it doesn't work and it's not going to cut out right. In which case, you'll simplify it to do the unroll. You can still use the more complicated one for your 3D print and your renderings. You just can't do the unroll of it. So you'll simplify it, you'll make it angular, and unroll that.
But you could use like a triangle or like a hexagon or something that has straight edges on it.
Absolutely. And you can twist that and have really good results. And you can look at a lot of the ones that people have done in previous semesters. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of the 3D prints. There were some pretty cool ones last semester where they actually were kind of circular, but they had just facets and they twisted, and they were pretty good. Yeah, so you guys can see these, pass them around, etc. Those are just the ones that I happen to have left. Most of the time people want to take them. So, all right, I think that's it. So you guys are free to start working.